So you think you can tell heaven from hell, blue skies from pain? Can you tell a green field from a cold steel rail? A smile from a veil? Do you think you can tell? Not bad.
Pink Floyd, not bad. Not bad at all.
Not bad. I figured I'd get something like low key that I could maybe manage.
How young are you, man?
38.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, you still respect the classics, man.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
I don't know if there's any good music these days, man.
No, nothing.
Yeah.
I was actually, my brother's in a band, my older brother, and we were out last night in Brampton, and he does like all the old school rock stuff. So me, my other brother, cousins, like that's.
What instrument is? Or is he?
He's a drummer.
He's a drummer.
He's a drummer. I play guitar.
Okay.
But not like professionally, like I did it for a long time recreationally, and the reason why I chose that song was when I was young and I wanted to try to sing and play guitar before I realized you don't have a voice. I think that was one of the first guitar songs that I tried to like play around with and sing or whatever. So
the old ones like Zeppelin and Pink Floyd and
best.
Eric Clapton, you can Stevie Ray Vaughan, all kind of stuff, right? Well, Luigi, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you. Thanks
really
happy to be here.
No, I'm excited about this. I know we spoke just recently, and then I'm trying to remember how. Yeah, there's a connection there. There's a whole Kevin Bacon kind of thing going on.
Yeah, there's a couple people I guess that have been on the show that I know pretty well. Mike DiMartino, who went to high school with my older brother. Like they were part of the same group of guys, and they still will see each other periodically and stuff when that group of high school guys gets together. Ellie from the Plumbing Expert.
Yeah.
He's
always a pleasure talking to him.
Yeah, he's same high school as me. Like we all grew up in Malton, so he was a year older than me, but we were always sort of there. And I've known Ellie for years, and then. Recently, I saw Selena from
Opulife. Yeah,
and I know her as well. So yeah, there's
small world.
Yeah, I figured why not reach out.
No, totally reach out, and I'm always interested in these kinds of conversations. Yeah. So I mean, I like the idea of us talking about tradespeople working hard, but not working smart.
Right. Yeah.
And what we're gonna talk about what they're damaging, I guess, mentally, physically, just like their one tool that they just keep on ignoring, right?
It's everybody's one tool, right? You only get one body.
That's simple.
And so it doesn't really matter what you're doing if you're not taking care of it. You're gonna get to some problems for sure.
You totally will. Dr. Luigi Nalli.
Yeah, Nalli. Yeah.
Nalli. Sorry, is it? Yeah, it's Nalli.
Yep, that's right.
Okay. And then I'm just curious. I know what MBA is. What's the DC? What's the
chiropractor?
Chiropractor.
Yeah,
okay. And then the BPHE?
Bachelor of Physical and Health Education. So that was my undergrad. After my undergrad, I went on to chiropractic school, did that. And then most recently, I guess more just for fun, I did my MBA a couple of years ago, part-time. So
nice.
Too much education.
Well, no. I was curious about all the letters. I wanted to get an idea of it. But so we're talking with Luigi here from PinPoint Health. It's www.PinPointHealth.ca. Hit the phone number to reach the facility is 416-744-7900. You can also email them at info@PinPointHealth.ca. And also, why do I have? Oh, sorry. Your email is lnalli, NALLI at PinPointHealth.ca for his email, and then you can find them on Instagram under pinpoint_health, or his own personal one, which is under Dr. Dr. Lounalli. You can find them all over social. I want to do a quick shout out to Mayor's Carpentry. Thanks so much for the tea. Long sleeve, it's great. It's still cold outside.
Yeah, it is.
Normally it's supposed to be warmer, but at least we don't have snow.
Yeah.
And that's it. So Luigi, where do you want to begin here, man?
Where do you want to begin? I'm happy to talk about anything. I love talking about like I have a passion for public health promotion, right? Where you're trying to just give knowledge in order to keep people healthy. I spent 5 years on the radio on Global News doing this. I had a live call-in show, so I would field questions from the public about anything and everything health related. Obviously, with my background as a chiropractor, my specific specialty is anything that's what we would call musculoskeletal related. So essentially your muscles, your skeletons, your nerves, all those things. My team at PinPoint Health, we've got everything from walk-in doctors to other chiros, physios, medical specialists like orthopedic surgeons, everything. So
who's like the youngest? Because what I like to say is the young trades are doing so many bad things, not realizing that they're doing so many bad things. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I think I mentioned to you on the phone that like my dad, when he was in his mid to late 40s, he was having difficulty in and out of a chair.
Yeah.
And now me being 52, I don't have difficulty getting in and out of anywhere, right? It's just like I'm a little surprised because he only lived to 57, and I knew that he always had chronic pain for basically the last, I would say realistically, 20 years of his life. Wow. You know what I mean? Which is really ridiculous. Like the late 30s into early 40s, he was just always struggling to just move around. And I'm like, that's not, the human body was designed to be better than that. But you have to be careful about what you do when you're younger. And we all have been young. Yeah. We've all been young, strong, and we could totally move that and do that. But we have to be smart about it too. Yeah. And then I guess it's really, when it comes to tradespeople, it's the chronic issues. It's the repetitive actions about, if you're a roofer, if you're a drywaller, mudder, if you're a tile setter, if you're a trim carpenter, your hands and knees are always doing the same things over and over. And I am hoping that the younger generation is understanding that being in the trades is not the workout.
Right.
That's not the workout.
No.
It's a physical job. It's a physical career. It's also a very mental one too. But you need to still supplement that career with actual physical activity.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. And you know, the thing is, you said a couple things there that are really, I think, important for people to realize is, you know, when we look at evolutionarily, like it's only within the last 100 years that we're living into 60s, 70s, 80s, right? Like ideally, or not ideally, but back in the day, you know, something getting to 40, 50, 100, a couple hundred years ago was what you expected out of your body, right? And so, you know, obviously now that we're living longer, our bodies may not necessarily be adapted to that yet, right? So that's one thing where that may still have not caught up. The other thing that you mentioned there is, you know, people don't realize that is you have one body, right? You've got to do something to take care of it. And the body works in a way where it doesn't like the same thing over and over again. That's where injury happens, right? So you talked about repetitive strain sprain, which is the word, the terms we would use in the clinical world. Anything that you're doing continuously is not going to be good for your body. Now, people think that that's just a movement. So like if I'm picking something up and that repetitive strain sprain, but me just sitting here for extended periods of time is a repetitive thing. There's no motion involved, but there's no change in my body. And that's where injury happens. Whenever you don't have, our bodies are meant to be moving, to be doing different things. So like you said, and it's even simple things like when we give people ergonomic advice, even if we looked at the muscles that control the eyes. Bless you. If you're looking at something, you know, if this is my computer screen and after 20 minutes, I should try looking further because different muscles activate in order to do that. Yeah. So it's no different than what you're saying. If your job is whatever, fill in the blank, in the trades world, you're an electrician and you're doing a lot of overhead work, right?
Or just the twisting of cables.
Or just the twisting. Yeah. So then it should be something else, right? Like maybe it's a long extended walk. There's got to be something different from it. And breaks. The other big thing with anything in the corporate world, whether it's corporate, trades, doesn't matter, is every 20 to 30 minutes, you should be taking a break from whatever it is you're doing. Now,
it's not a break like this.
No. And that the other thing is every time we do a lot of corporate outreach and wellness things where we work with large companies, and every time I say breaks every like 20 minutes, people are like, you can't be telling workers to take, but it's not a break in terms of like, this is your lunch hour. It's just simply, like I said, if you're looking at a screen for 20 minutes, look at something far away for a minute. Yeah. If you're sitting for 20 minutes, get up and walk around your desk for 20 minutes. If you've been on a ladder, whatever, twisting, whatever it may be in the trades world, get down, do something different for a minute, right? Like breaking that up, the dynamic nature of the body is really what prevents injury. It's the static, not meaning not moving, but doing the same thing. If you're doing the same thing, you're going to be predisposing yourself to injury for sure.
I mean, we can get into a world of stuff like even your commute.
Yeah.
Like you're just sitting in the same position for a long time. You need to figure out, and I respect a lot of tradespeople and business owners that have been here where they start talking about they have a area that they work in and they purposely do it where they don't want to have travel more than half hour, max maybe 45 minutes for that reason. They don't want to be just stuck in traffic for hours on end where it's very difficult on your body by doing that.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah. And that really speaks to what I was just saying, right? If you're not changing what you're doing, then your body's going to start to break down. And people will inherently find that out themselves. That's why you've had certain people who will say, I don't really want to be in my truck for longer than half an hour. They don't necessarily know the research on that, but maybe they understand inherently because their body's telling them. But, you know, when you look at something like, you know, the biggest thing in terms of the musculoskeletal world, if you're looking at the biggest cause for disability, it's low back pain.
Oh, for
right?
sure.
100%. And it's only second to the common cold.
Where's the origin of low back pain?
Yeah, this is a good one. So the low back, so the reason why low back pain is so common is for a number of reasons. Number one, we stand upright.
Yes.
So we are putting, gravity is acting on us. The other thing is if I stripped away a skeleton, right, and I showed you a skeleton, everyone can think of the skeleton. You've got the head, then you've got the rib cage, then you've got, you know, just your spine, and then your pelvis. The low back is essentially the only thing that's keeping it upright is muscles.
Yeah.
Right? There's no, you would appreciate this as in the trades world, there's no structural integrity.
Nothing.
The upper back has the rib cage.
You got one column, one point of structure, so to speak.
Exactly. Yeah. And when you look at the spine as a total, the most common is low back pain, followed by neck pain, followed by what we call thoracic or mid back pain. It very, very much in last place. And the reason why is that structural integrity of the ribs. So the origin of most back pain is just simply deconditioning of the muscles that are to keep you upright. Because if we
You're
had
talking about abdominal issues. Abdominal, core, muscle issues.
Core meaning everything around that. So back muscles.
So as you get older and you are not doing your crunches or you're not doing abdominal core strength exercises, you're going to start to see a fatigue or a possible failure of your low back.
100%. That is.
I totally believe it. I know for a fact.
Yeah, it's the root cause of low back pain is deconditioning of those muscles for whatever reason. It may be an injury that happened. It could be just sitting in the chair for too long. Those muscles become weak. When they become weak, you develop low back pain, right? Yeah. So the lifetime prevalence of when we look at low back pain, it's 80%. What that means in everyday terms is two things. Either it means you as an individual have an 80% chance of developing back pain at least once in your life, or 80% of the population has back pain at any given time. That's how common back pain is. And the crazy thing about back pain is you have an 80% chance of getting low back pain. If you experience low back pain once in your life, which again, 80% of people will, and you have an 80% chance that you will if you haven't already. When you do experience it within a year, if you experience it within a year again, your chances of it continually keep going up. So exactly, you get to a point where essentially you're managing with it and you have low back pain for the rest of your life. Now that doesn't mean that you're disabled from low back pain,
but it's affecting you
100%.
Yeah. And then it starts to get into the realm of mental wellness at that point.
Everything, yeah.
Right? It starts to really affect you. And I don't want to simplify it, but it really, if you were to do some sort of abdominal core exercises, you could prevent that.
Everybody that's listening to this, if they really want to look at something in terms of what you should do, you should look up what's called Stu McGill. He's a biomechanist from Waterloo. He's one of the foremost experts in low back pain in the entire world. He has what we call what clinicians, anybody that's in the rehab world, calls Stu McGill's big three, the big three exercises for core, right? Plank, side plank, and a modified crunch. If you can do those things daily, that is essentially 60% of the battle of low back pain, of managing it, right? Yeah. So Stu McGill's big three exercises, if you go on YouTube, wherever you go, it's all over the place. They're not hard. They're very easy bird dogs, these simple things that just activate the core. And those exercises were chosen in terms of the research when Stu looked at this was really because if you think of a plank, right? So I know people think your abs and you think you got to do a sit-up. There's a lot of motion involved in a sit-up.
Yeah.
If you have low back pain, it's unrealistic to assume that you can do that. A plank is not that. A plank is just holding something in a static position, so almost anybody can do it. It doesn't matter if you're in pain. If you're an older person, we can modify it. You can do it off your knees. You don't need to do it off your toes. So things like that, these simple exercises that just engage the core are the key to managing and preventing low back pain.
How challenging is it for... there's some big boys in construction, right?
Yeah, 100%.
And when I say big boys, I'm talking about some big bellies. Yeah. Like I never in my lifetime have ever hopefully I will never get to that point where I'm going to be looking at pant sizes in the 50s or 60s. Like it's just ridiculous. But there are some big boys in the industry, and I guess it just makes it more challenging to try to do those core strengths, right?
Yeah, again though, when we look at I'm big at looking at the epidemiology of back pain to understand something. And again, when we look at that number that I threw out, the 80% prevalence of low back pain, it actually does not discriminate against body size, sex, gender, where you come from, the type of work you do. Like tradespeople are just as likely as an office worker.
Of course.
So it's really the morphology or someone's body is not really going to necessarily predispose them.
You want to take a break or it's coughing?
Yeah, sorry. It's not going to predispose them necessarily more, but it might make it harder to treat when you're dealing with those large pant sizes.
But here's the issue with I mean, we talk about today's generation on it's got to happen now kind of thing. That whole mindset that it has to happen now. We need the results now, right? But that's not even a generational thing. I think older trades are the exact same way. It's like if they don't see the issues resolved fast, they give up on trying to resolve them. Yeah. And that becomes more challenging. But they quickly, it's fun to speak to 30-something, 40-something trades and try to explain to them, wait till you hit your 50s. Because there's all these milestones, right? As soon as you start hitting these key milestones, you start realizing that you can't lift, stretch, move the same way that you used to. But the thing is, you're not supposed to. No. You're supposed to just find your range that works for you and then go with that. 100%. When we were younger, it's like touch your toes. It's not about touching your toes. No. It's about how you keep your legs a certain position, and it's the stretching that you're trying to figure out. Yeah. It's not about the objective of getting to the toe point, right? No. So it's like all you got to do is just slightly modify what you need to do, but the worst thing you can do is not do anything.
100, yeah. And you said what's key in the industry is modification.
Yeah.
Right? Work within the tools that you have, the limits that you have, and do it in that regard. Always have to work within the tools that you have, right? Like you said, if you can't do something, forcing yourself into doing that is only going to, never mind predispose you, ensure that you get an injury, right? You should not do something that you cannot reasonably do for your body. It's just not possible. That when you're going beyond those physiological limitations that you have, like you're saying, if you used to be able to touch your toes and you can't touch your toes now, don't try to force yourself. Now, you could maybe do things to, like if flexibility is an issue, maybe you could do things to be working on flexibility so that you're preventing any further regression of that. But you're never, and I always tell people this, sometimes it's not about getting better, it's about not getting worse.
Yeah.
Right? That's an important thing that people have to realize. It's not always like, and when we see people for treatment, oftentimes people simply are thinking about and they don't appreciate the spectrum. It's either I'm in pain or I'm not in pain, right? Like that's what they're thinking about. But the reality is, where is the spectrum of that pain, right? Pain is just not yes or no. It's how often do you have that pain? How long does it last? How intense is it? What's the type of pain that you're feeling? And it can change. And so it could be different. And so making sure that you're modifying to never get into those different types of pain syndromes is very, very important.
A couple of things. I guess the first thing is, does the pain slowly progress without us realizing that it's actually progressing because we're not doing anything about it?
Yeah.
But we just, every single, for lack of a better sense of term, every day it increases a tiny bit, but we just take it.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden, a month goes down the line and it's probably twice as much the pain that we remember it being. But since it was incremental, we don't really experience it being that dramatic.
Yeah, and your body does a lot of things in the acute scenario of anything that's done in terms of pain in order to try to protect yourself, right? It's trying to heal itself. So yeah, it's most injuries that end up becoming severe, with the exception of trauma, right? Like obviously if you fall off a ladder, that's different. That's that acute injury happened because there was a traumatic incident. But most of the other things that we're dealing with, it goes back to how we started it. Repetitive strain, sprain. You're just creating a weak point, right? At some point, whatever is happening that you're doing that has a repetitive nature, that every day, and sometimes these things, it could be over a month, it could be over 5 years. Some things take over 10 years, right? Like in terms of severe osteoarthritis of the knee, like I know we talked about, for example, tile guys who are kneeling all the time.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen in 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. That takes years
Yeah.
to get to that point where all of a sudden it's fully broken down to the point of no return. And so the question becomes, along that way, what are you doing again, A, to slow it down? Because some things you're not able to completely stop them, but you can slow things down.
That's the real question, is like, how do you modify the way you actually perform your task?
Yeah.
If it's still limited to that range of motion.
Yeah, I guess, and it's a good point, but I guess it's not only about what you're, so if we use, let's say, the tile example, right? Because I think we should focus on one. If we look at that, right, we're going to say, okay, but there's only so many ways to kneel, right? There's no new way of kneeling that anyone has figured out. There are going to be better tools that you can use, different, and you would know this better than me, the different knee pads that exist, all of those things. Building in breaks, right, like we just talked about. But then the other thing is, what are you doing at home? So as an example, if we were to look at the knee joint, it's surrounded by muscles, right? So are you spending your time when you're not working strengthening those muscles, right? If you're strengthening those muscles, then you're going to protect the joint.
What's the go-to to strengthen a knee muscle?
I mean, it depends what we're looking at. For any muscle or for the knee?
For the knee.
Well, the quads, right?
Quads.
For sure, quads.
So basically you're doing some sort of a squat or a lunge motion.
And functional is even better. So something like that, which works both your quads and your hamstrings, your glutes, everything.
But I want people to understand that it doesn't matter what age you're at. If you're in your 20s or you're in your 40s or 50s, you can do a weightless squat or a weightless lunge.
100%. And that's what I'm saying. So are these people that are kneeling all the time, are they going home understanding that this is my tool that I use every day? And am I doing the proper upkeep? Am I doing whatever, my 50 squats a day that I want to work on, my 100 lunges, whatever it may be, building out a program to do that, right? It's no different. Like the problem in the trades world and even in the corporate world, again, we're not appreciating our bodies the same way, like say an athlete.
Yeah.
Right? An athlete knows what they have to do. Like if you're looking at a boxer, they don't just show up and box. They're practicing that jab, their hooks, whatever it may be, but they keep working on it, and then they work on the accessory muscles that make that more powerful, more fast, whatever it may be, so that when they are in that fight, they're using it. We're not doing that in real life, right? Like we sit in this chair not realizing, but really what we should be doing is saying, okay, I sit in this chair for a living. If my job is a desk job, I need to be at home every day doing those McGill Big Three. Yeah. Because that's what keeps me sitting in this chair. It's what keeps me productive. It's what keeps me doing my job.
How do you tackle change in the mindset? Because as you get older, you remember what you used to be like in your youth, where we're all super men and women, right? And you could lift certain ranges. You could accomplish, like we're at peaking, getting higher, stronger, and all this other stuff. But at some point, life comes along and starts compounding the hell out of you. And then you start realizing, I can't do 2 plates, 3 plates, or whatever it is. And it's like, I quickly left, forget that. It was not about how much weight as much as how much range.
Yeah.
I was focused more on that, on the flexibility. And I'm still with my own body. I still have difficulty just getting my arms over my back and touching my back. Right. And it's like, that's a whole flexibility thing where I have to keep on focusing on working on that.
Yep.
I've let go of that strengths, those gains that you were used to do when you were younger.
Yeah.
But you get a lot of people that are having a hard time letting go of that. Yeah. And that's mindset, right?
That's mindset. And at some point, I think it's also tailored towards understanding what you want out of it. And I think a lot of that just comes, different people get to different points in their life and they change, right? Like you know, I'm not the guy going to the gym I don't need to press 2 plates anymore. I'm happy to use a machine in a functional range, make sure that I'm still getting the resistance training in. So that's mindset, right? Like you've got to convince yourself to some extent that that's what you need. And I think you know, guys like you and I will have figured it out also because we suffer the consequences of trying those things.
Yeah.
And so it's a learning thing. That's why as you get older, you get wiser in these things where, you know, I remember being the young guy at the gym and people are looking at you like you're crazy trying to do that type of weight. And now I'm the older guy in the gym looking at people saying like, oh, that's not going to be good in the long run. And really, what's the value? Now, is there a value? Like if you are a power lifter, then there's a value in lifting heavy weight because that's what you do. Yeah. Right. But if what you want is, and that's where I think you almost have to start with, what's your goal? Right? Is your goal to be healthy? Well, if your goal is to be healthy, then what are we doing? Resistance training is important, but you don't need to be moving tremendous amounts of weight.
No.
Also, like, and this is where, people will say, well, let's say, for example, you want hypertrophy or growth of your muscle, right? Like, I want big muscles. Well, people will say, okay, well, then that means you've got to lift heavy weight, or you've got to lift weight that's, in the 10 range or whatever. The research out there shows that it doesn't really matter what you're lifting as long as you're getting to 80% failure. So whether that's me lifting heavy weight 6 times or me grabbing lighter weight and being able to do it 20, 25,
Yep.
I'm getting 80% of that way there, no matter how I split that. And that will give me the result I want. I personally, when I look at the gym and when I do things, I like variability. I think there is an advantage to still pushing your body a little to try those heavier weights, maybe not crazy, but push yourself a little bit to see, can you still go beyond something? But then there's other times I'm in the gym and I'm just focusing on high reps.
Yeah.
Because and also I do it based on what am I feeling right now. There's sometimes I'm dealing with a hip injury right now. I'm not going to be going to squat crazy amounts of weight or leg press. I'm going to go there. It's going to be functional stuff, body squats, some lunges, because that's the reality that I have to deal with. But, you said something a bit ago where you said that's all of that is better than doing nothing.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. Most people will sustain an injury, have something happen, and they think that the solution is do nothing. That's the furthest thing.
Well, they'll use it as an excuse that they can't do it now.
Yes.
But that injury leads to another injury, or maybe even complicating that first injury.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden now you're just giving yourself a way out.
Yeah.
Constantly.
Yeah. And that's the vicious spiral of like where chronic pain starts, right? It's the person who was active, did things, whatever it may be, gets an injury, most injuries, again, outside of those traumatic falling off a ladder, most start very small. Mm-hmm. And then they get ignored because they're small. And then they get a little bit bigger and they're still ignored. Then maybe they're a little bit bigger and then they go seek some type of intervention, whatever it may be. Most people want the easy way out, right? And so it's, can I get a pill or something like that to just mask the pain? Then all of a sudden it becomes a big problem, and now that's where their life starts to fall apart because that thing now prevents them from working, right? As an example, them not being able to work maybe ruins their relationship with their wife because they're not being able to work.
That's where the whole mental wellness comes in, right?
And then it's a vicious
cycle.
Circle.
I mean, the older that I've gotten, and I want to get into supplements and I want to get into food and cause and effect, I think it's as I get older. When you're younger, I could pretty much eat anything and your body could process it because you had that metabolism, you had that, the way the body was designed at that point.
Yeah.
But when you got older, there was almost like a light switch cause and effect. When you consume something, you saw a result from it, right?
Yeah.
And so we all know what it feels like to have that slight hangover. We all know that if you just overate on bad food, the way your body felt, the way you weren't focused and everything like that. So you start paying attention to that. But I think a lot of generations, the younger ones, start just referring to supplements and they start offsetting it.
Yeah.
But that's a whole other, I've never been a fan of my family doctor because it's always been a script given to me. And my thought process is like when he's giving you pain medication, this is just for chronic. I'm not talking about the traumatic series. If something happens, right? That's a different story. But he's giving you some sort of pain meds to handle things.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what's that really doing? It's first of all, it's not healing you.
Yeah.
It's just reducing the pain that you're experiencing.
Yeah.
So is it really benefiting you? No. So then all of a sudden you start realizing, well, why don't I start on the train of supplements? And then I started doing the whole supplement things and started increasing certain things. But then you start discovering that a lot of that is not even being absorbed in your body.
Yeah.
And then I started reading a bunch of stuff like you start taking all these supplements and 80% of it is urine. It's just literally flushing through your whole body. Your body's not absorbing it.
Yeah.
So now you start going back into eating real foods.
Yeah.
And then you're absorbing it that way. So it's like, I know that if you start eating, there was a joke that a friend sent me, here, I'll buy you dinner at McDonald's. And I was like, dude, do you have any idea what McDonald's would do to my body at my age right now?
Right. Yeah.
Like I can literally take one bite and I'll feel it in my body on what it's doing to me, right?
Yeah.
Younger generation will just consume it as if it's a vacuum, right? And they're like, it's totally fine, I'm good with it.
Yeah.
But as people, we get older, we have to be cautious of those foods that we're touching, that we're eating, right?
Well, 100%. Like, I think when it comes to, there's a couple things there, right? Like the where we can go on tangents with this, but in terms of if we're looking at, if the question for someone is, I want to be healthy because I want longevity, right? I want to live as long as possible, as well as possible. Let's just say that's the goal that you want to set out for yourself. Again, starting with that in mind, 90% of the way there is the stuff that we all know.
Yeah.
There's no rocket science.
There's
you can make it as complicated as you want.
It is pretty straightforward.
No rocket science. We all know it. If you, and the research is clear on this, if you do something to somehow restrict your calories, so you don't overeat, essentially, like you said, and it doesn't. Now we can get into what are healthier choices of foods, fine. But even if we don't go, again, we want to get 90% of the way there. So don't overeat.
Yes.
Is step one, right? Try to make it so that it's foods that are real. We all know that, right? Like, of course, if you're going to have a steak, some broccoli, a piece of chicken, whatever, that obviously we all know. Nobody's going to sit there in a multiple choice question and say, is that healthier than a burger from McDonald's?
Yeah.
Of course, we know the answer to that. We all know that. So make good whole food choices. Don't overeat them. And then in terms of exercise, it's about simply, and the research on longevity for exercise is exercise about what we would call a moderate intensity. And I always tell people, you want to know if you're doing, you and I sitting here, there's no exercise. We could talk, we're not running out of breath. If you and I start going for a walk, moderate intensity is the point where we could still talk, but every once in a while I'm like I have to catch my breath.
Yep.
That level of exercise, 3 to 4 times a week for 30 to 45 minutes. Now, how do you want to do that? You want to do a brisk walk, maybe you're raking leaves, like whatever. That if you do those simple things, whole foods, don't overeat, and do some type of moderate activity for about, call it 3 to 4 hours a week, that's 90% of the longevity game.
It's true.
That's it. Now we can get into the supplements and those things, because how much do you want? Like, do you want to make your chances 95? Do you want to, like, we're working in the weeds here. The problem that I have with supplements like you is that most people that are fanatics about supplements aren't doing the other stuff that is 90% of the game. So you're not, that's why, like you said, you're just pissing it out. You're just spending money. You're not doing anything. And that idea that 90% of the game is for everything. If you do those things, you're less likely to get colds. You're less likely to get cancers. You're less likely to get heart disease, right? It's just simple. That's what longevity is. All-cause mortality. Anything that could kill you gets reduced if you do those simple things. A little bit of movement, eating real food, and not overeating on them. That's it. Now, this is where we can get into, well, what's the better way to restrict calories? Like, should you be intermittent fasting? Should you be taking away a complete food group, like, say, low carb and just focusing on keto? That, in my opinion, and is where you get into the mental aspect of a person. So it's more about what works for the individual. It's individual. Right? For example, basically, me, I intermittent fast. Yeah. I intermittent fast because I always say I'm all or none. Yeah. If I start eating, I'm not good with, so if you want to, let's say, losing weight, okay, you have to, it's math, right? And you guys will appreciate this as tradespeople, right? Like if I said I need to build this room, there's math. Yeah. It's the same thing with losing weight. It's calories in and calories out, okay? Now the next question becomes, how do you reduce your calories? There are 3 broad ways that you can reduce caloric intake. You could do it by restricting a food group, like I said. So you could say, I'm not going to eat any carbs. I'm not going to do whatever. So you could take something away. I'm only going to be a vegetarian, or I'm only going to be a carnivore, etc. Yeah. One way. You can restrict quantity. So you can eat everything you want. And this is the idea of measuring portion size, right? Or you can restrict the amount of time that you're eating, so you're eating in a smaller window, and inevitably there's no magic there, with the exception that you're just having less calories throughout the day because you're eating in a smaller window. All 3 of those things work for different people. Yep. For me, I can't do quantity control. I can't go somewhere tonight and if I'm gonna have a steak, I want the 20-ounce ribeye. Yeah. I don't want.
Yeah, I haven't gotten to the point where I'm weighing stuff.
Yeah, I don't want. Yeah. Oh, just give me 8 ounces of the sirloin, right? Like, I don't want to get there. Okay. Whereas my wife, as an example, she's great with quantity control. She can have those small things throughout the day. So it really comes down to finding out your psychology for the things that work, but none of it is rocket science. And don't be, the problem I have with all these things that are sold is like, and especially on social media and everywhere, people that are proponents of one thing, they sell it like it's good for everybody.
Yeah.
And it's not.
It's not.
It's
There's
not.
different body types. There's different circumstances.
And different sustainability in
Yeah.
your mind.
Yeah.
Right? Like you could say to me, like, okay, I'm regimented enough that I could say, fine, for the next 6 weeks, I'm going to control my quantity on every meal. Fine, I'll do that. I'm not going to be able to do it long term. So if you can't do it long term, what's the point of it? Right? I think do the things that are, you could see as not a process, but rather becoming part of your life. Right? Like where you could say, no, this is just the way I eat. I only eat this way, right? Like, and build in those things so that it works for your life.
People just have a hard time understanding changing your eating habits, right? As you get older.
Yeah.
And I think that outside of the lower back being the number one issue, I think the second one that I hear from a lot of people, tradespeople wise, is inflammation.
Yeah, 100%.
Joint issues. It could be whatever, wrist, elbow. And they just don't understand how it won't go away. And I remember when I was younger, probably in my 30s, it was the first time that I had a rotary cuff pinching and I couldn't even lift my arm up. And then it was the doctor, and I go back to the doctor, and he was like ready to give me a steroid shot.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't want that. How do I heal this? And he just explained to me, you're going to have to keep your arm above your shoulder while you sleep.
Okay.
That's it. And then eventually that worked. And then the other one is plantar fasciitis or whatever.
Plantar fasciitis, yeah.
Yeah, that thing. So you get a lot of guys in the industry that have that as well too. And then again, the doctor. It was the shot, it was medication, and then it was the boot, and then eventually you probably get into a surgery or stuff like that.
Yes.
And it's funny that people have asked me, have you ever had that? And I go, I did have that when I was younger. And they're like, how did you solve it? And I said, I solved it, me personally, how it worked for me. I started sleeping with my foot off the edge of the bed.
Right.
So my foot was no longer flat while I was sleeping on the bed.
Right.
So as soon as I had the foot down like that,
It started to heal because you're
healed.
offloading it.
Yeah. And all of a sudden it disappeared on its own.
Yeah.
So it's just, I think you have to cause and effect and figure out what's good for you.
You're touching on an important topic there, though, which is, and there's, again, a few things. Everything that you're saying, I'm thinking like we could go a bunch of different ways. But the thing, and this is specifically my world, again, when I look at physical problems, your first intervention for a physical problem should be a physical solution.
Yes.
Okay, so this goes back to what you were saying, like I've got a rotator cuff issue and here's a medicine. Wrong. It should be therapy and exercise.
Yes.
And when you look at the spectrum again of, this is the way we operate at PinPoint Health, everybody. The spectrum of treating somebody is you always want to start most conservative, meaning as little invasive intervention as possible and only move towards the more invasive options when the lesser invasive options fail. So physical problem, start with the physical interventions, therapy and exercise. If therapy and exercise is not working, what's a little bit more internal than that? A medicine, because now you actually have to put something in your body.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe those things could be coupled together, right? Maybe the medicine could be used to help you do the exercise, all that stuff.
Yep.
That stuff starts failing. Maybe we're looking at injectables, steroid injections, PRP, Synvis. There's a whole bunch of different injectables. Injectables fail. Maybe we're looking at surgery. And again, I'm like asterisks on this because it depends what issue we're talking about, right? But I think the point that I want to make is people need to realize that when it comes to physical problems, the first solution should be a physical intervention.
Yeah. I
Okay.
agree,
now
totally.
I'm biased. I run a chain of clinics.
No, but I totally agree with you.
But if you,
because that's how you got into the situation.
Exactly.
So then that's how you're going to get out of the
and
situation.
that's where you need a professional like a chiro physio, someone who's specialized in that world to work with you to say, and that doesn't mean you have to go get treated every day. Again, physical intervention, we just said, if you've got low back pain, the idea that you think that the pill is going to help you, it's not. I just told you, McGill's Big Three, it's a physical intervention.
Yeah.
Now, on top of that, maybe go get some therapy, some massage, whatever, because it helps, right? Maybe you do need to take some medicine to help you get through it, right? Like all of these things, it's about all of the tools that we have in healthcare work, okay? It's about how do you position it. So if we look at something like low back pain, again, using that, is there ever a time that therapy and exercise work? Yes, absolutely. Is there a time when medication is needed for it? Yes, absolutely. Is there a time when injections are useful? Absolutely. And is there a time that surgery is useful? Yes. And if I looked at that broadly, I would say, like, let's say medication. So You're talking about inflammation. You said inflammation. Yep. So I'm going to take it not inflammation, just inflammation, but inflammatory back pain, which is different than what we call mechanical back pain. Inflammatory back pain is like autoimmune stuff. So you've got something like ankylosing spondylitis or rheumatoid arthritis, all of these other autoimmune issues. Autoimmune.
What is that? That's like an inflammation?
Yeah. So autoimmune is essentially your immune system, for whatever reason, starts attacking itself, and it will attack the joints. Okay. And so this is very different than your standard back pain. This is inflammatory back pain. When you've got inflammatory back pain, you need medication, because there's nothing.
You got to reduce it.
Yeah. There's nothing you're going to do on the physical side to reduce that inflammation. You've got to stop that immune attack on your body. Mechanical back pain that's simple needs therapy. Injections are sometimes needed. So let's say you've got sciatica, pain going down your leg. You might need an injection in that nerve to numb it out, because you can't deal with that excruciating pain.
Yeah.
Surgery, you've got such a severe disc herniation that it's putting pressure on that nerve, that the only way to get pressure off of that nerve is to cut the disc. So there's a time and place. The question becomes, the thing that's often done wrong is people just pick and choose what they want to do. Right? Like the idea of like, oh, I have back pain, so I'm going to take a medicine. But no one, you're making that choice. Or a doctor has told you because they're not up to speed on what the latest research is on back pain or what they should be doing. I think now it's changing. I think most doctors, physicians I'm talking about, will recommend therapy and exercise as the initial intervention, right? The idea of using medication is sort of starting to move away, especially with the opioid crisis, all this stuff. And also, the consumer, the patient, is more resistant to those things. We've all been scared now. Like you hear these stories, everyone's like, I don't want to take that medicine. I don't want to become addicted to something. So, and that's good. That's good that there's a little bit more fear. There's also,
but I think more people need to do their research too.
100%.
You can go to a medical practice and you can get their advice and their suggestion. But I think you're right. You touched upon it earlier, like social media. When it comes to health and fitness and social media, I find it really strange that I would say 99% of it are young, vibrant, healthy people pushing ideas.
Yeah.
Maybe 1% is that older person that you're seeing, 50s and 60s, that are really doing proper exercises and they're explaining their eating habits and everything like that. And you're like going, okay, that makes sense. But you should do your own homework.
Yes.
You shouldn't just be check the box and go, well, this person said I should do this and I'm just going to follow this whole thing now and do this.
Yeah.
No, I think you should be looking at your own body type, your own career choice, and what you do, and do a cause and effect and quickly understand the results of what's happening to you.
Yeah.
Right.
And then that's starting with what you want and working backwards, right? Like, no, I mean, just apply it to anything. If I wanted to build a custom home, we'd have to start with the final design.
Yeah.
Right. In order, and then work back. Like, okay, then that's when, general contractors are going to come in and say, okay, step one is we need the foundation, right? Like, you guys know that world. It's no different when you're looking at your health. It's like, well, what is your end goal? Most people, like I said, if you ask most people, 95% of people what their goal is, they probably would say some variation of health and longevity. I just want to live as long as possible, as well as possible.
Yeah. A healthy life.
A healthy life, yes.
Yeah.
And so again, that's where it's like work backwards from there, right? And again, I gave you 90% of the answer 10 minutes ago whenever we talked about just healthy eating. And then it's that 10% where you're going to work. And then that's where, in the process of being healthy, that's where you sustain injuries, things like that. And being a good consumer of understanding, like you said, do your research. What is it that I should be doing? Like, in my opinion, and not just my opinion, there's lots of research to support this. I was once, I don't do it anymore, but I was part of what was called an advanced practice provider program. So it's a rapid access clinic for low back pain. So essentially what it is, it's a government funded program where family doctors could send their patients directly to someone like me, like a chiro or a physio, and it was covered by OHIP.
Okay.
And the reason why they were sending them to us was to triage them.
Okay.
To determine what you need. Because again, a family doctor or a walk-in doctor is sort of like the GC. They're not a specialist of any one thing.
No. Yeah.
They know a little bit about everything, and they know how to like navigate the system.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's really their job. That's what they're designed for. But when you're going to your GP and you've got a specific issue, which is low back pain, they're not the right person to completely give you the answer on it. So the rapid access clinic was designed because what was happening in Ontario was the family doctor, whose job is to triage, right, to send to the appropriate person, it was looking at the system and saying, okay, the only place I could send this is a spine surgeon. Was going to spine surgeons. Spine surgeons, they're so backlogged. If you need surgery for your spine, you're waiting forever, unless it's like an emergency, like like a cauda equina or something crazy like that. You're waiting forever. These surgeons would end up looking at their patients and saying, I saw 100 patients today, and 1, maybe 2 needed surgery. The rest just needed therapy or exercise or whatever. And so these clinics were created so that people like me, who know more than a family doctor about low back pain, are going to look at a person like you and say, okay, no, man, like, you don't need to go see a surgeon. They're not going to operate on you. What you have is not something that's going to do well with surgery. With you, what we need is we're going to focus on some rehab. We're going to try that first. Or maybe I do see you and you're so severe, I say, yeah, I got to get you in to see the surgeon, but at least now you're a qualified patient. The surgeon knows that it's coming from a more qualified person, and they know it's more likely what they need to intervene with. Because no surgeon out there wants to operate on your back if they don't think there's good outcomes.
Yeah.
And there's only very specific criteria that will make for good spine surgery outcomes. You have to have certain signs and symptoms in order to determine that. Again, most people, 99% of people with low back pain don't meet that criteria.
Yeah.
And so the answer in that is that, or maybe you're looking at something where I'm looking at you and saying, you may have inflammatory back pain. Maybe you have an autoimmune condition. Let me send you to a rheumatologist. Get some blood work. Oh yeah, it turns out, yes, you actually have rheumatoid arthritis or whatever, just as an example. That's a different form of treatment. But you need to know, and that's the example of navigating the system in healthcare, right? Like, we need to understand, and I think most people don't appreciate that your family physician, the walk-in doctor, they're general contractors.
Yeah.
You're going to them with a very specific question, and they're not the plumber that can fix your plumbing. They're not the electrician that can fix your electrical.
I agree, yeah.
They're the guys that are going to point you to the right electrician, the right plumber. And so I think as the consumer, more people need to realize, because part of the problem is that people rely on that. They're like, I went to my doctor, he told me to do this, or she told me to do this.
But then do your own research based on that. It's not an end be all, right? No. That's how I've always looked at it. And whenever I've gone to, because you do the annuals and it's not that I'm challenging, I'm just questioning.
Yeah.
Simple as that. And then I try to navigate and try to figure out what to do or what not to do. But in my 40s, I started to do a lot of other things that I wasn't doing when I was younger. And so, I mean, like, the cold showers are definitely there, right? And I see a benefit. They help me.
Yeah.
They're a pain in the ass, but I see a benefit, right? I don't get into the cold plunging and stuff like that. I want to eventually build a sauna.
Yeah.
And I've read data that saunas will help you as well.
Yeah.
So it's like, I know what saunas are like. I've been in saunas several times and I know what my body feels like and what I'm expelling at that point.
100%.
So it's like, I'm getting rid of certain things. I've done the yearly 7-day water cleanse fasting, right? And they benefit me.
Yeah.
I feel like Superman-y again at the end of it when I start eating again.
Yeah.
But I'm also mindset. It makes me not want to go to the bad foods. I'm not saying that everybody should just dismiss and listen, I'm European. I'm still going to consume alcohol.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
That's just, I'm going to have wine. Am I a big spirit guy? I'm not a big spirit guy.
Yeah,
but I'm going to have the wine. I totally, once in a while, it's totally fine.
Yeah.
So I'm not completely getting rid of alcohol. But I think it's like, if you start doing all these little things, you're going to live longer, healthier.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to be that elderly person that's in a chair or at home and just you're waiting for the date.
Yeah.
That's all you're doing.
Well, I think you're cognizant, right? You're thinking about it. That's step one. Some people don't even bother to think about this. This is what I'm saying. Like you've already started with your end goal. And what are you doing? You have physical problems and you're doing physical interventions, cold showers, saunas. These are not like you are doing, that's something physical to your body. Your body is a physical thing. It needs physical intervention. And those are the benefits, the exercise, all of those things. Again, it's not rocket science. Those, like even those things, let's say like you brought up cold plunging, right? Just as an example. So cold plunging is amazing. I do it as well, right?
Yeah.
Like it's like it sucks like when you're doing it, but it feels good after. There's also a benefit. Like athletes have been doing this forever for just simple inflammation, right? Like your body gets sore and ice is going to help with some level of soreness. No different than heat can help with some level of soreness. But where I think all of these things get misconstrued is like this idea of, say, a cold plunge, right? So now there's some data to suggest, okay, it might be beneficial with weight loss, right? So now you've got people who aren't eating healthy, they're not doing anything, and they think that jumping in a cold plunge is going to get them. And this
doesn't work like that.
This is what I'm saying. You're like, these things are the 10%.
Yeah.
That goes back to my point. It's like and people do this all the time. They're focusing on the wrong thing, right? Like it's like, for example, here's another good example that I've seen with acupuncture, which we do at the clinics.
Which is beneficial.
But I've had people that have asked, like, does acupuncture help with quitting smoking, right? And it's like, do you actually think that just putting a needle and a point in your body is going to be the cure? It's not. Like, could it be part of the tools? Like if you're using a nicotine patch, you're doing some behavioral change, and also you want this? Yeah, like if it all works together, maybe. But people too often with all of these things want the simplest solution, right? They want like this cold plunge with weight loss. It's like, well, I'm cold plunging. I'm not doing anything else.
Okay, that's like, I want to train. I'm going to start taking roids.
Yeah.
Okay, well, my mindset, I never have. I knew a lot of people when I was younger that were taking roids. Yeah. My mindset was like, even if you're taking roids, you still have to do the work.
Yeah. 100%.
It's not like a switch where you take roids and all of a sudden, boom,
you sit at
balloon.
home. Yeah.
It doesn't work that way. You still have to do the work.
Yeah.
You're just going to have different gains as a result of it.
Yeah.
But there is also a cause and effect.
Yes, of
right?
course.
When you start looking into research and it's like, it could potentially mess up with your reproductive system. I'm like, no, I'm not interested in that.
Yeah.
So it's like, people need to understand with quitting smoking, correct me if I'm wrong, is that not a mindset thing?
Yeah,
as much as it's an addiction, but it's still a mindset thing that actually shuts it down.
Like a behavioral thing.
Yes.
Like, yes. Yeah. That's what but that was the point that I was trying to make. If you really wanted to quit smoking, the best tool is the behavioral change, which is 90% of the game. But people want the simple 10%, because the stuff on the edges, that 10% that I'm talking about and the point I'm trying to make, a lot of that stuff is simpler in terms of the amount of commitment, time. Like as an example, if we go back to weight loss, what is easier, to just turn on the shower to cold for 2 minutes at the end of every shower, or to exercise, eat healthy? And so now people are like, well, I'm doing cold. I'm going to try losing weight with just taking a cold shower. It's like, but that's not going to help.
It won't happen.
Exactly. And too many people focus on that with too many things. They're looking at that last little bit. It's like they have end stage knee osteoarthritis and they're like, can I take some glucosamine now? It's like, no, it's not going to do anything anymore. Like
you can pump as many as you want. It's not going to do shit.
Yeah, it's not going to do anything. And this is where people want the easy way out for too many things.
My thought process is that all these little things that I'm doing, because lots of people have asked me about the juicing, right? So I still do the ginger shots. I do celery. I do carrots, and I do beets, right? Yeah. It's just like, because I started educating myself about fatty liver disease.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I started getting it not too long ago, and then a doctor was telling me about it, and like, do you drink? I'm like, not enough to create a fatty liver disease. So then it was basically sugar consumption.
Yeah, that's
insulin resistance. And that's what it became. So then I started reading about the beets, and I'm like, it tastes sweet. It tastes like shit, in my opinion. All juices taste like shit, in my opinion, right? Yeah. But it's a natural. There's nothing in there, and I see a cause and effect. The showers and the saunas and everything, I think, will help your mindset to understand. You'll second guess yourself about eating something that's really bad for you.
Yes.
You'll start to think, well, if I'm doing this already for my body, and I want to be a very active elderly person, why do I want to sabotage the opportunity of getting there?
100. There's lots of data that suggests, like, if you want to eat healthy, start exercising. And and it goes back to what you're saying in terms of, it gives you a mindset, because like, it's very hard to go to the gym and spend an hour and a half and then go home and say, I'm going to throw that all away by just eating whatever the hell I want. So it's that physical pairing with your mind is very important. And that's the point you're raising. Like, if you're doing all of these things, it just helps you to stay better. And that's what I'm saying. Like, that's 90% of the game.
Yeah.
Right? That's what's going to get you to that goal of health and longevity.
What are I'd love for you to share some stretching that we should be doing as we're getting older, that is really no different than the 3 that you mentioned from him.
Yeah.
But just stretching in general. Like, I mean, it's a good idea to get, when you wake up, to do something.
Yeah. So I would say the most important things, if we're talking about stretching or flexibility. It's about, we look at in the ergonomic world, we look at what's called activities of daily living. ADLs is what we call them, okay? And an ADL is like what is required for you in life. Almost for everybody, an ADL will include a squat and something overhead. Because think about a squat, like how do you get down on the toilet? It's a partial squat.
Yeah.
How do you sit in a chair? It's a squat and going up. So that would be something that would be very important, is working on that range in your squat. And that's as simple as, is staying there and working in depth in that. And then the other thing is functional range of your shoulders, right? Like you have to be able to wash your head and reach something above in a functional range. So keeping range of your shoulders is also important, right? And that's what will happen as we get older. We will go into a contracture state. So, babies start this way, and then over time you do this. And when you see old people, what are they doing? They're starting to go back into contracture states. And all of those things become harder. So the more you can slow down any deficit with being able to lift your arms over your head and being able to go into a squat, again, that's like 90% of your activities of daily living are going to require one of those two. Now, in terms of what else should you be doing, that's when you get into the nuance of the individual, right? So if you're someone that does not have an issue with low back flexibility, you don't need to work on that. Right? Like some people inherently have good flexibility with some things. And it's interesting because a lot of it is not, people think flexibility, but some of it is morphology. So you gave me an example when we started talking where you said you can't really reach behind.
My arm is behind. Yeah.
That's not really a flexibility issue as much as it's probably a morphology issue of you. Like I'm looking at you, you've got broad shoulders, a wide back.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter how flexible you are. Like when you've got a structure preventing you from getting there, you're just not going to get there. So some of it is your body type. I hear a lot of people saying, oh, my hamstrings are tight. I've got to stretch my hamstrings. Most hamstrings, when we look at the research, are not tight. They're just short muscles. Doesn't matter how much you stretch it. You're not going to change the length of that muscle. So
it's hard for me to do a yoga pose.
Yeah,
sitting, right?
But just sit. But that, so a lot of it is, that's where I'm saying like the way I would broadly answer your question is make sure that you have the ability to squat and reach overhead. But in terms of what else should you be doing, I think that's where it's specific to who are you as an individual and what are your limitations? What is the problem that you're dealing with, right? So if you gave me a real life example of an individual example, I could tell you what you should do, like low back pain, do McGill's big 3. But for me to say everybody should stretch their hamstring would be false.
Yeah.
The other thing is you and I, we're two guys sitting here. We will tend to be more tight and stiff. A big problem is also what we call hypermobility, which is too much mobility, which exists more in women. So women, a lot of the times, and this is where it's funny, right? Like the dichotomy, if you go to a gym, what do you see? You see women doing cardio and stretching, and the guys are lifting weights. And then, but when you stop and think, okay, what do most females suffer from as they age? They're going to suffer from things like osteoporosis.
So muscle loss.
Muscle loss, which, you know what would prevent osteoporosis? The weight training. And what are most guys going to suffer with long-term? The cardiovascular disease. What's going to help with that? The cardio. So we're like doing the wrong stuff at the gym.
It's interesting. Yeah,
right?
True.
So stretching, like, and that's what I'm saying. Not everything is about stretching. Some things are about should you be strengthening, right? Some people, you don't need any stretching because they're hypermobile. They actually have too much mobility, which creates a problem. Because your body, again, it's an elastic, but it's a spectrum. There can be too much and there can be too little. The happy place, the middle, right?
Yeah.
Like most things, it's the moderation of that flexibility that we want. So we've got to get into the nuance of what that individual needs.
Do you want to take another Lodgen or?
Yeah, maybe just in
take
case.
Another one there. I want to ask you about, it's funny how you get older, you start learning, it's like letters. It's almost like I'm waiting for the whole alphabet to be just dropped off onto me, right? Like TMJ. You know what I mean? Like you go to the dentist and you're like, what the hell is TMJ, man? And like they start explaining to you about it. And I'm like, how is the jaw locking all of a sudden?
Yeah.
I've been chewing the same way all my life. What's been changing here, right?
Do you want to talk about
Sure. Yeah.
And again, I think, the nice thing with you and the most of the audience for this show being contractors, you'll appreciate mechanical failure.
Yeah.
So if we look at the jaw, so like if I'm sitting here and you're thinking, how does that happen over time? Well, again, what did I say a few minutes ago? I said, as we age, we start to do this.
Yeah.
Okay, so where's the camera? Is that going to be the camera that's on me?
Those,
so just so I can highlight a point. So if I'm here and when I'm younger, I'm straight. I've got everything's aligned. So as this changes, your TMJ, which is your temporomandibular joint, which is essentially where your jaw is connecting. It's what's opening and closing.
The hinge. Yeah.
So it's closely related to your neck, right? Because it's there. So when my jaw is here or my neck is here, my jaw does a certain thing. As we age and we do this, or poor posture, the things we do to work, our world is not down there. It's there. So what do? I look at my neck. This is what happens. That changes the mechanical angle on the jaw. And so that's exactly why do you eventually get
so over progression, you're mechanically changing the position of your jaw.
Your body is changing as you get older.
So how do we do that? Like, how do we fix that? We start.
So, and this is what I'm saying. You're thinking it's the jaw. It might not be the jaw. It might be the fact, again, we work in front of us. So everything here is tight and our back is constantly stretched. So oftentimes it's what we call an upper cross syndrome. What we would need to do is stretch and strengthen the back because you want to get back into that posture. So a lot of like the TMJ stuff, it's not just about working here. It's about working on what's called deep neck flexors, bringing your neck back, changing the dynamic of the whole structure because one joint is going to be related to the next joint. It doesn't exist in isolation.
Just bring the mic. Sorry, I don't want to miss anything. But I've always said that lower back pain starts from your feet.
Potentially, yeah.
Right? So it's like
a lot of the
you
time.
get a lot of people that are just stubborn in their ways on the footwear that they wear, and they'll continue to wear that same footwear over and over, but they don't realize that foot is taking a different shape in that footwear over time.
Yep.
And like tires, like cars, there's a odometer on it.
Yeah.
And you have to get rid of it. Doesn't matter how loyal you are to that footwear, and it fits perfectly in your feet.
Yeah.
You need to change it, get rid of it.
100%. I've heard you with a lot of the people that have been on your show talking about the regular preventative maintenance that you would do for mechanical things in your house.
Same thing.
It's no different. We're often not doing, like, that's a perfect example. Your footwear, the pillow you use, like
sleeping, everything.
How many things do we have that you just keep forever? It's like, yeah, but it's going to break down. It's going to change. And that change is going to have an effect. Again, we're just a mechanical structure. That's all it is. And the same way you can apply the mechanical breakdown to a car, a wall, whatever it is, when you understand the weak point, same thing is happening in our bodies.
Is it a matter, like, Luigi, about it's like, I have a lot of respect for older people, but you're right, totally, now that you're bringing it up, you start seeing them when they age, they start to kind of curl and get shorter.
Yeah.
Our ears get bigger, our nose gets bigger, everything gets bigger on certain points, but then the body feels like it gets smaller and shorter. And I think it's just like they're kind of going back to the way they started.
Yeah, which is what happens.
Which is like now that I'm paying attention to it. So it's like you got to be aware of that to kind of pull it back.
And there's a very good reason why that happens from an evolutionary perspective. So if you think, again, babies are constantly like this, right? Why? Your vital organs are here.
You're protected.
So you're protecting your vital organs. And the same thing happens as your body's smart enough to know that as you've gotten older, you're going to be less able to react. So being closer like this increases your center of mass, so you're less likely. Like, there is an evolutionary advantage to those things happening, and it's unfortunately the reality of our bodies. Like, there's nothing that we can do about that in terms of it naturally happening, but we can do something in terms of being aware of it and working on it, right? That's what I'm saying, where work on that proper posture, the backs. So how many guys go to the gym and all they do is chest? Again, this is already tight because we're already here. You never see people doing back. You should be doing your back twice as much as you're doing your chest.
Yeah.
And if you're going to do anything with your chest, stretch it.
Yeah.
That's it. It's already going to be. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't work out your chest. There is a benefit to still doing resistance.
Well, find your strengths and then, but also focus on your weaknesses, right?
But the idea of like just these aesthetic muscles, right? Like, oh, well, I want like the big chest. Yeah, but your back is so much more important to keep that longevity, that prevention of that contracture as happens as you get older, right? That and in extreme examples, like people who have strokes will immediately go into contracture.
Yeah.
Again, our body does that immediately because it's protecting the vital organs. That's why if you see someone who's had a stroke and let's say they survived, they're often in a contractured state for that reason.
So how do we, because you guys also talk, when we touched upon this briefly, is you start getting into, I guess, the airborne situations of coming into your body, what we breathe. One of the first things I noticed when I started doing the fasting and the cleansing and the cold showers is the heart. I literally, like, for the life of me, sometimes I could probably touch someone's wrist and I still can't find their heartbeat, right?
Okay.
Like, it's hard to read it or whatever, but you guys can do it a lot better than
Yeah.
I can. But when I started doing all that stuff, I could feel my heart increasing, the beats, right? Because it was being reactive to what was what was happening to me in the cold shower application.
Of course,
let's say.
it should.
So all of a sudden, it's like realizing it needs to move the blood in the body, which basically starts to make you feel warmer.
Yes.
So now your beats per minute starts increasing. So now you're feeling that, and it's no different than when you're on job sites or you're experiencing certain things that your heart starts to react, your lungs starts to react, coughing, your throat, irritation, all this stuff, everything.
I'm dealing with it right now. Yeah.
No, so it's like, how do we solve those situations when we're on different jobs? Like, I mean, I'm very grateful that the younger trades out there are being more cautious of having respiratory protection, hearing protection, all kinds of stuff. But there's still a bunch of them that are not doing anything, that they think they're invincible people.
Yeah.
But that's going to be an issue later on in life.
Yeah. And again, I think it just goes back to, you got to be aware. You got to be cognizant of it and be willing to make that modification, those changes, because I it's a funny story. I did industrial painting while I went through school for 9 years. So I started as a guy.
You're using all the safe paint.
Yeah. So oil paint, like lots of deck painting, block filler, like the really bad stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like we'd have to wear respirators. And I started as a guy just sanding like steel door frames and filling up pails of paint, to eventually like actually being a very good painter, right? Like I still, I'm sure there's better painters that are watching this. I'm obviously not a painter, but I did it for 9 years, right? And I remember like having guys that would spray decks. Number one, they're not even wearing a proper respirator. They're just wearing like an N95, which became popular during COVID, but I knew about N95s back then. And I remember once a guy was up on a scissor lift and I was filling up the pails for him. And he like shuts down. He's like, "Lou, do you have a knife on you?" And I was like, "Yeah, I have an X-Acto knife." And so he comes down. He's like, "Give me the knife." I'm like, "Okay." I give him the knife. He takes off his N95. He folds it in half and he cuts like a half little moon. He puts it back on so there's a hole, and he puts a cigarette into the hole and he goes back up to spray. And I was like, "Oh my God, like what a horrible choice of things to do." Like the smoking compounded with that oil paint, and it's like
you're breathing both.
It was just, and I saw that's just one story of so many, the culture that I saw. And that's why I was interested to connect with you, because this world is real for me. Like I was there. I did it for a long time. Like obviously not as long as you guys and most of the people that watch the show, but I saw things that I was like, why are you doing this to yourself? Like, it's almost like there's a lack of value for themselves. Right. And that was a sad thing where it's like, come on, like surely, that's not good. There's nothing there that, so your question, like, what do we do? I don't know. Like, what do you do? Like, people need to feel value for themselves. I don't know how we do that. It's such a hard question. Like, there's no way I could possibly answer to that. I just try to make people aware of the things that, and like something like the example I gave is blatantly obvious that it's not good for you. But so many people are doing so many little things that they don't realize aren't good for them because they just don't realize. Right?
It's like two things. I think there's a large portion of the population that doesn't really realize that we have one body. I mean, fine, you have 2 hands, 2 feet, 2 eyes, 2 ears, whatever, all that shit, but you have one body, right? Yeah. And it's not until later on in life you start realizing how valuable that one body is. Yeah. Because it starts to shut down. Yeah. Based on what you decided on. Yeah. And then I guess the second thing, are you afraid that we are on a trajectory of like really unhealthy people physically and mentally if we don't start paying attention to what's going on with our one body? Like I kind of paint the picture of Wall-E. Yeah. You know what I mean? The way the humans were portrayed in that movie, right? Where it's like everybody was just morbidly obese. Everybody was just sitting at chairs. Nobody was actually being active. Nobody was eating correctly. And it was just like, are we really on that way to becoming that way?
I think if you would have asked me that like a couple of years ago, I would have said yes. Like that's my fear. Something right now, I feel like people are a little more cognizant of like the general things in health that we talked about. And I don't know if it's a bias because I'm just hanging out with people who tend to be healthier because it's like a like-minded individual like me. But I mean, the stats speak for themselves. When we look at the stats in the world, so not using what I know, I feel like the people I'm around are more cognizant of this stuff. Like guys like you were talking about it on shows like this. But then when you actually look at the stats, it's like, yeah, we're becoming more and more unhealthy as we keep going. The vast majority of the population. So it's like, yeah, geez, like, you know, I think we're preaching to the converted in some sense. Like the people who are even going to be willing to listen to this podcast are going to listen to it because they're already inclined. It's the people that will never listen to this podcast with what I'm saying and what you're saying.
Until they get to a point where they have to listen.
Until they get to a
point.
point.
But it's going to be almost too late at that.
Yeah, and that's where I think, like, as, you know, this is like, now we can get into the political side. Like, what are the political structures doing to educate people on these things, right? Like, it's...
You get older and you start looking at the 5 basic food groups.
Yeah.
And the way the government designed all this stuff. Like, I've already been very vocal that I don't even walk down the aisle in the cereals.
Yeah. Well, look at the food pyramid, the Canada Food Guide. The biggest thing they're telling you to do is eat that crap. You should. They
really should just flip it upside down, right?
Yeah.
Like,
you should not be eating that crap. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like, I'm willing to accept that for some people, being vegetarian is better. Some people are more skewed towards meat.
It's up to you.
I'm okay with all that stuff. I think where for sure we know is that whole foods are better than anything that's made in a factory.
Yes.
Done. Simple.
100%.
Like, done. Like, that argument is over now in the science world. Like, if anyone's even questioning that anymore, it's crazy because there's nothing good. I mean, I know all this stuff, and sometimes when I look at the label, I'm like, what the hell is that? Like, I don't even understand some of the things that
are how hard it is these days to find clean pasta.
Yeah.
Like when I look at all the pasta brands and I'm looking at something, because occasionally I like having some pasta, and I'm like, why are all those ingredients in there? I don't understand. I don't need that stuff, right?
Yeah. Usually it's preservatives and to make it more palatable so that it's more interesting for your mouth to eat, right? Like that's the problem. And those things are good. Listen, I'm sure you and I could binge on that stuff for sure. Like it does taste good, but I'm not even saying to never eat it, but to limit it. Like I've got 2 young kids. I do my best to give them whole foods like that because I want them to know the stuff that's really good for them. Does that mean I never let them have cereals? Of course not. They're kids.
Yeah.
But compared to like when I was growing up, and it was like, yeah, just eat as much of it as you want. Like, no, like we know that that's not good. So I think it's also about like setting up your family for success in those regards, like the good role models. But again, that goes back to like the bias. You and I are talking about it because we're interested in it. If you weren't interested in this stuff and I reached out to you, you may not even want to talk to me. You'd be like, I'm not. This podcast isn't about that. It's about whatever else. The fact that you're interested in it, we talk about it. So I think, you know, as more people face these things, they will figure it out for themselves. Like we said, like at some point you just got to make your own choice, right? Like no one else can make it for you.
It's funny that I almost want to smack these tradespeople sometimes because out of those 3 segments that makes a tradesperson, the skills is always front and center. They think that's the value. That's where I run my business. That's where I make money from. So I'm going to really focus on that. And I don't care about the percentage, portions or whatever you want to talk about. It's not until the skills doesn't really run the business properly that they start realizing, hang on, I need some business coaching here. I need some business understanding. I got to educate myself a little bit about the business now. Yeah. Otherwise my business is going to fail regardless of how skilled I am.
Yeah, of course.
And it's not until their body starts to deteriorate, whether it's based on what they consume or whether it's by the work that they do, and they start focusing on all the issues that we brought up here, do they start paying attention to the third, when I think it's first and foremost should be the third should be first.
Yeah.
And then I think the skills should be third, because then now you can actually have a nice balance of all 3 of them.
Yeah.
Right. But everybody that gets into this game, they start with the skills, go to business, and then go to health.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you have no business and you have no skills if you have no health.
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. Start with the end goal in mind. Right? Start with that end goal. And if you've got that end goal, work backwards. Like it's no different than if you talk to financial advisors. What do they start with? They're like, when do you want to retire and how much, like what type of lifestyle do you want to live when you retire?
Yeah.
And work backwards from there.
Yeah.
All of it should be done that way. We just talked about it happens in the financial world. It happens in the construction world. Why is it not happening with your life and your health?
It should be, yeah.
You're taking this thing like day by day, which again, you should live day by day. There's an advantage to not being too caught up in the future and in the past, 100%. But some people don't even think about it. They are literally thinking about just today, and it's fine. I'll do this, right? Like I gave like that example of the cutting the hole in the N95.
Yeah.
I remember we would be on a lot of scissor lifts too, right? Like the amount of guys that wouldn't tie off, right? They're wearing the harness. I remember we'd put on the harness, and I was at the time when I was doing it, it was still the culture. Like if I took the clip to clip it onto the Zoom boom or whatever we were on, it was almost like, like, why are you doing that? You could just clip it. Like, don't worry if someone comes. It's like, yeah, but that's not the point.
Yeah.
The point is the end goal is I don't want to be dead at the end of today. And I don't want to be crippled. I don't want so what's the big deal? And so many people, and that's one thing that I noticed in the trades world, it was just for that moment, right? Like it's and that's like you're saying, they're just starting with the skill. They're killing their bodies. They're doing like, some guys, you see them, I remember they'd work so many hours a day, like to the point where it's like, but how long are you going to sustain that? Like, I get you want to make 6 figures this year, but do you want to make 6 figures only for the next 2 years and then be on disability? Like,
because that's a potential.
It's a very real
it's a reality, totally.
It's a very real. I saw a ton of guys. I saw some very scary things. I saw people fall off of scissor lifts and stuff like that. It ended their careers. They were lucky to even be alive. It's crazy, but that idea of like, you've got to consider that, and that goes back to what you're saying, like that angle. Think about your health, what you want out of life, and then work backwards and set yourself up that way, right? Like, of course, your skills, all that stuff are important, but if you're going to work so hard to the point that you burn out, and burnout doesn't even need to be physical. Sometimes, like, I know I see it in my world too, like, a lot of healthcare professionals are the same thing, because a lot of our services are fee for service, right? So the more you work, the more you make, of course.
Yeah.
And I see it too, but it's not only the physical breakdown, like when I'm like, because even some of the people that work with us, like the Kairos physios, it's a physical job, massage therapists using your hands. But when you're working so hard, it's also the mental breakdown. You miss stuff with the next patient. So my example in the trade world would be like, yeah, you might love it when you first get into it, year 1, year 2, year 3, and you're working so hard that now you're showing up at people's homes and you're looking at ways to cut corners because you're tired. Yep. You need and you know this better than me. I'm just hypothesizing here and extrapolating from what I see in my world, but that's the problem. And
it's going to start to take a toll.
And I talk with my team about that. Like when I've had people that are like, I'm like, you're working too much. Like, it's great. Like, I get it. As the president of the company, obviously revenue is a big KPI. We obviously want to hit revenue targets, but I don't want it to be at the sacrifice of your health, your happiness, and then also the risk you're putting other patients in, because then you're not properly there. You're so stressed about so many other things. And then like now we can spiral into life, right? Like where people then take on more debt than they should and blah, blah, blah. And it's just,
at least there's awareness nowadays about mental health as much as there is physical health.
The only problem I have with that, though, and I've said this several times, is that we are still looking at it as two distinct things, but it's health.
They're connected.
Yeah, I know, but so much of like the tools out there around mental health are focused on mental health. So there's lots of programs, government programs, like where it's like, oh, you have a mental health issue, we can, this support and that support, this medication. But like, if you look at the research, one thing to boost your mood is get out and go for a walk.
Yeah.
And it'll
completely change your mood.
90% of the way there. Like, and anybody who works out regularly will tell you that they usually are in a better frame of mind. So like, why are we not as a society tying those things together more often, where we're just talking about, hey, health is made up of your mind and your body. Do both. And I always used to tell people, especially my undergrad, which you said, what's BPHE, physical and health education? I started, that was my, where I cut my teeth in terms of getting into healthcare, was the physical education aspect. When you're unhappy, you can't touch your brain. Like, you can't probe into your brain and stimulate the happiness center of your brain. You can't touch it. But you can get up and go for a walk, and that touches your brain.
Yeah. And
that's what I'm saying. Like, a lot of these things start with movement. I'll give you a good example. Fibromyalgia. I'm sure you've heard of it or no. When people are diagnosed with fibromyalgia. Fibromyalgia is essentially a chronic pain syndrome where they have widespread, intense pain all over their body. Okay. Wow. When we look
how does that happen?
It's sometimes it's just the result of, and I guess where I was going to say might get to how it happens. We don't know for sure how it happens, but when we look at fibromyalgia, what we do know is that it's widespread pain. So there's three things that you'll have when you have fibromyalgia: widespread pain, depression, poor sleep. So how does it happen? Maybe it started with poor sleep. Your poor sleep leads to depression. That depression leads to widespread pain. It doesn't matter where you get in on that circle. Sometimes maybe it started with an injury, a severe injury that then led to poor sleep, depression. It's all this constant circle. And a lot of the stuff around fibromyalgia management, get them active again. If you're active again, okay, maybe it's not going to help the pain right away. It's definitely going to make you more tired. So you're probably going to sleep a little bit better. Yeah. And because you start to see maybe some positive change, you're probably going to have your depression go down. And you know what's incredible? The more people do that and that gets better, their pain goes a little bit down, then their sleep gets better, then they're less depressed. Then
continue.
So the same way a lot of people get into this vicious circle, you can get out of this circle by just doing the same stuff. And I have always been a proponent that the easiest way to get out of most of these physical health problems is with your body by just moving.
You old enough to remember participation?
Yes. Yeah.
How come we don't see any of that?
I know. It's crazy.
Like I was angry during the pandemic years how there was never any discussion about physical activity.
Oh,
I know that's a whole other world, right? But it was just, I understood where it was coming. The narrative was coming from it. But like, why don't we see another couple like participation?
Yeah.
Advocating for doing things properly, just physical movements, just going for a walk, just doing something, right?
Yeah, and
none of that is being happened by the government.
And again, that was my point when we get into the political side. There's no proponents of this, right? Like I remember, what was it in the early '90s when Bush 1 was the president, and he appointed Schwarzenegger as for like the fitness for kids.
Yeah,
similar like participation, like. Why do we, like right now, I know that there's a Ministry of Health and there's a Minister of Health and an Associate Minister of Mental Health, which exists. Where's the Associate Minister of Physical Health?
There isn't one?
No. And this is what I'm saying. Like, and I know the Associate Minister, great guy. Like that's not my point. My point is like, we are not valuing what we can simply do with just simple exercise. Yeah. And when I say simple exercise, I'm talking going for a walk at a brisk pace where you and I can't have a conversation.
That is better than doing nothing.
It's 90% of the game.
Yeah.
It's
simple
like,
act.
Yeah, eventually.
I used to do that on the job site.
Yeah.
I needed a break from the job site. I literally would just loop the neighborhood.
Yeah.
I would just go for a walk because I wanted to clear myself of what was happening. So it cleared my mental state and it actually gave me a little bit of physicality, right? So I was just like, okay, I feel different now. Let me get back on site. Let's continue the conversation.
100%.
And it works.
And this is what I'm saying. Like, why are we not having more things around encouragement? Like, even when you look at schools, when they're looking at budgets and taking away budgets, where do they often take it away from? Physical education programs.
Really?
Yeah, because you don't want to take away math from students, and I get that. That's fine. I'm not saying that math should be the sacrificial lamb or English or French, or I'm not saying that. But don't jump straight to physical activity. That's why we have younger kids that are more obese, they're more unhealthy. And in today's world with this, all you do is spend time on this.
Yeah.
It's never been more important. Yeah. Kids don't go outside and play anymore. We're moving into a future where you're going to have a virtual thing on your head and you're just going to be in your room. and you're going to be playing with your friends on that virtual world. Like if physical activity was ever important, it's right now. Like it's never been more important in my opinion, because as technology progresses, we do less.
Yeah.
And as we do less, we're getting sicker.
Yeah.
So that correlation to me is pretty clear. Like when people are like, well, why are people sicker? We move less. Of course, there's the food quality, all that other stuff. But I'm telling you, again, when you look at the longevity studies, just moving helps so much. So if it's so easy to intervene that way.
What's the decrease on, as you get older, metabolism rates? I guess it's different for men and women, right?
It's different. A lot of your, I guess what you're talking about is what we would call basal metabolic rate, which a basal metabolic rate is like if I'm just laying here, my body still has to burn calories to have my heart function. A lot of that is more a function of mass, right? Like bigger people will need more of a BMR because, right? and mass, even like muscle mass, right? Like the more muscle mass, all of those things. There are some individual nuances, right? There might also be like health concerns, like people that have a low thyroid or a high thyroid that can affect your BMR. A lot of different things. But as we age, does it change? Yeah, probably. And it becomes less, which is also why as people get older and older, they move around less, they do less, and they eat less.
Yeah.
Right. For that very reason. So, it does, but it's not a massive change, right? Like it's not like huge. It's just your body also will adapt to things.
And if you're increasing your physical activities,
yeah,
then you're actually still maintaining some sort of metabolism, right?
Yeah, that's outside of BMR. So that's everything above and beyond, right? Like, so your BMR is, again, just simply like if I laying here in a hospital bed, what's it going to take in terms of that? That's where, and then this comes back to my simple math principles: calories in and calories out.
Simple.
You're going to burn a certain amount of calories just by being alive. Exercise can contribute. Now, if you're at the weight you want to be at, what you should be doing is making sure that those two things are the same, right? Simple. If you're going to eat 3,000 calories and you want to maintain the weight that you're at, you should make sure that you're burning 3,000 calories. And that's going to be a combination of, again, that BMR, basal metabolic rate, and what extra stuff do you do?
Just pay attention to some athletes and what they're doing. Like, I mean, everybody was always shocked at Michael Phelps and what he was intaking.
Oh, but the amount.
But what he was expelling.
Oh, crazy.
Like, it made sense once you started doing the math, right?
Yeah, 100%.
As we get closer to just to wrapping it up soon, I wanted to get you talking a lot about, because a lot of tradespeople, a lot of people in general, will use injuries as excuses.
Yeah.
But how do you handle patients that have these injuries already? And I want to get to the extreme too, where it is a pretty serious injury, whether it's from fall or whatever happened, and they're coming at you, and now you've got to handle the work differently, I guess, instead of a chronic pain that someone's done over years, right? But then if they had an accident of some sort and something happened, how do you handle those patients there?
Yeah, so when we see and we deal with a lot of WSIB stuff, right? So we've got a couple things there. Number one, it's about looking at what's the real injury, because some people out there do want to just fake it, let's call it, right?
Yeah.
As a clinician, I can never tell them that. I can only say you seem to have what would be inorganic, right? So that just tells me it doesn't make sense. So if it doesn't make sense, you're probably over exaggerating,
because the treatment is not going to help.
No, some of this stuff also has to do with secondary gain. We look at maybe this person hates their job and they want this injury to be worse than it is just so that they don't have to work. Okay, so if we get those people out of the bucket.
Okay, yeah.
now we're dealing with people who actually have an injury. When you look at WSI, anything that a workers' compensation injury, when we're treating this stuff, number one is about we talked about ADLs in terms of activities of daily living. Well, now we need to understand what are your activities of your work, right? And then based on the activities of your work, understanding, so that's capacity demands, right? So what is it that you need in order to do your job, like a work analysis, and then understanding the individual's capacity, right? So let's use some real examples. Let's say I'll use my old summer job painting. Okay, so obviously a lot of shoulder work in that with rollers and things like that. So if I know based on that world that when I look at that, I could say, well, I know that in order to be a painter, your movement, your shoulder needs to get to 160 degrees. Yeah. Right. Let's say person comes in with an injury, and as we're looking at that, and I say, okay, I know a key thing about your work is that you've got 160 degrees of flexion, of shoulder flexion. But when I'm measuring you're only at 90, let's call it. So now what do we do? So sometimes time off is required, right? So and that's like a break, right? And that's even, some people discount how important that is, but sometimes it's just a simple break. Then it's about work hardening. Work hardening means reintroducing. So now you reintroduce to the range that you're comfortable with. So now I'd have to look at that and say, okay, I don't want you working on a roller above this height. So I want you, if you are going to work with a roller, you stop at 90. Now you might say, yeah, but the walls don't end at 5 feet. They go whatever. Then maybe you're not doing that. Maybe you're working with the brush today.
Yeah.
right? Like, so it's about
Or get on a scaffold and do the other part
exactly,
or whatever. Yeah.
exactly. So, this is where you're modifying.
Okay.
So you're modifying, and then while they're getting treated, you're working on everything to get better. The big component that needs to happen is reintegration into what their previous role was.
Okay.
Right? So ideally, if I'm treating someone with that shoulder injury, I do want to get them back to the point that they can do that pain-free. And at that point, that's when they've worked hard and they're back to work with no limitations. Go on, be smart about things. You have an injury, so don't predispose yourself. We'll give them advice, but that's what we've got to look at. So any workplace injury, it's about understanding what does their job require? What is their capacity right now? If there's a limitation, build in the work to have that limitation, like you said, like use a scaffold or whatever, and work on incremental improvements with the intention of getting back to where you were.
Because you will eventually get back to where you were.
Yeah, and that's what we do for workplace. That's what we do for sports. It's what we do for concussion. It's always the same. The idea is we know which if we're looking at a sport, we do the same thing. It's like, okay, we know your sport requires you to have 90 degrees of knee flexion. You're not there right now, so maybe you're just practicing. You're not playing, right? So we can do that in sports. In the work world, it's different because we've got to. Sometimes the injuries are so bad that what we've got to look at is you may never be able to paint again. So what are you doing instead?
Yeah.
Is there an opportunity, like maybe you're a really good estimator, is there an opportunity in your company where you could help with pricing out jobs and move into a different role? Right? Like that's sometimes a real conversation that has to be had depending on how severe these injuries are.
What are some things that you've seen that are irreversible? Like it's gotten to a point where it's like, we can only manage this now, right? This is
traumatic stuff.
Well, it could be anything.
No. I'm saying things like that would be, so when there's trauma involved, right? Like, so if something really bad where spinal cord injury obviously would be the extreme example or something like that. But even like when your bones break, they are never going to heal the exact same way. Right. So that's a problem. Anything where there's trauma and there's a complete disruption of tissue. So if there's a complete tear of something, a complete break of something, those often could be pretty bad things, especially if range of motion eventually is affected. The biggest thing I think with most tradespeople is being able to work within their ranges, right? And to do the things that they need to do. It's very hard to install a light fixture if you get
upper movement.
If you don't have that upward movement. So if something has happened so traumatic that you don't have that anymore, and something like that would be, if you completely tear a bunch of rotator cuff muscles, we can surgically repair that. Not me personally, but
it's possible.
It could be surgically repaired, but the price that you pay is loss of range of motion, right?
You'll never.
No, because the tendon has to get shortened now. And that's the whole point. Your shoulder will be stable. So if you've had repeated dislocations, like, the trade-off is your shoulder is dislocating because it's too much mobility, short and tight in the tendons, but now it's at the expense of range of motion. And so now it's about, can you modify? If you can't modify, then you might have to consider something else.
Why is it that, like, I've had a few breaks or you break a rib, you can't do nothing. Nothing. There's no bandage, there's no cast, there's no nothing.
No. It's stable. Yeah. Yeah.
Until it fuses back together.
Yep.
That's all it is. Same with collar.
Any bone that breaks. So the rib is unique because it can't really go anywhere. But if your bones break and there's no movement of it, it's usually okay. It's a simple type of fracture is what we would call it. If it's compounded, a compounded fracture is when there's multiple breaks. So you look at an x-ray, it's not just like a clean line, but like a bunch of like smaller segments in there. That stuff, or the bones have shifted, you've got to put those bones together, plate them, get them back together. So some fractures are not the end of the world. In fact, some fractures are better than certain muscular injuries because they can heal, like a rib fracture.
Yeah.
A rib fracture, it's going to be painful as hell when it happens. Fine. But that's it. It's like
it's done. Once it heals, once it fuses back, you're strong. It's fine.
It's actually that part, the callus that forms is actually stronger.
And I agree with you. I'd rather break than tear.
Some things.
Yeah.
Some things. There are some things like that because the tears are like if you had to choose to have a complete tear of a rotator cuff muscle or a broken rib, you should choose
I'm choosing the rib.
You should choose the broken rib because again, like you said, once that heals, it's going to be painful initially, but once you get the healing out of the way, you're good. A complete tear of a rotator cuff muscle, you might be dealing with some pretty serious like limitations in the future.
How do we? I have a very good friend of mine from high school. She had both her hips replaced.
Yeah,
one right after the other, and she's. I think she did the first one in her early 40s, mid 40s or something.
So it was really bad.
Yeah, it was really bad. She literally could not. I mean, but that's just a wear and tear in the joint, right? Is that? It depends. Every patient's different, but
I don't know this person. I would assume if it's that early, she probably had a history of some type of hip issue from when she was young, like a congenital dysplasia or something that would have predisposed that type of severe arthritis that early. Any replacement of any joint, the mechanical piece that is replaced on average tends to last about 15 years. That's the average.
Okay.
Any good surgeon and the surgeons that work with me will tell you that ideally, you want to do that one time in your life. So you want to try to get people as close to 70 before doing any knee replacement or hip replacement or anything. If it's not severe, obviously symptoms are the most important thing, but if you could delay it to that, it's better because what happens is the outcomes of second and third replacements are never as good. So if you can get someone to 70, they're likely never going to need it again.
Yeah.
They're also less active, so that average of 15
it'll last longer.
It'll last longer. If you're younger, you might be more active. It'll last less, and you need to get it replaced. The outcomes become more and more difficult. So my guess with someone like that is they would have likely had something that predisposed them to severe arthritis much earlier. Could have been a previous severe injury, a congenital issue, which means she was born with something, or an inflammatory, like an autoimmune thing that attacked the joint and destroyed it so bad. And as a result of that, the symptoms were so bad that she needed the hip replacement. And yeah, sometimes they will do one right after the other just to get it out of the way.
Okay, I would just want to wrap it up, Luigi, but I'd love for you to share some, I don't have any arthritis issues, I don't have anything like that, but I'm just assuming as you get older that all these little things are going to start to creep up, right?
Yeah.
What can you recommend doing to just try to avoid, I guess, just the physical activities?
Just keep moving.
Keep moving.
Keep
right?
moving. And when I say keep moving, again, like it's everything, right? Like it's simple things like just range of motion, right? Like this does not, again, we can get nuanced if you're telling me, I want to grow my muscles, I want to do this. Like if you're giving me things, but if you're just asking me as you age, like what should you be doing? Just make sure that you have the full range of things that you're doing. So work on that range of motion. If you notice a problem, go see a professional. Make sure it's not an injury of some sort. Get that worked on. Get the right exercises that you need. And that's really it. And movement. And again, the whole foods, like it ties back into the inflammation. The stuff that we take in is what our bodies are made out of.
Yeah.
Right? Like we're taking that energy and we're using it for, it's there. So make those healthy choices. Again, the way I started this show when we started, that's 90% of the health game.
Yeah.
If you do that, the rest of it is those minor things. And those minor things, that's where I'm saying work with a professional. You have certain fitness goals, work with a personal trainer. You have certain injuries, work with a chirophysio. You have certain underlying health conditions, work with your physician. Like work with those professionals to get those nuanced approaches. That's where that's going to help. But outside of that, again, try to move around. I'm a little bit more than the recommendation. I would say clean eating, I would say 80% of the time. So if you can clean eat 5 days out of the week and enjoy your weekends a little bit more, I think that's good. I think try to do something physical every single day, right? Whether and might not necessarily be a walk. Maybe it's a cold plunge, but something every single day. And somehow, along with the good food, is find a way to somehow restrict your calories in terms of just not overeating. Now, how you do that is your choice in terms of whether you're a person that says, yeah, I just want to be vegetarian, I prefer intermittent fasting, or I prefer quantity control, whatever works for you that you can sustain that long term. If you can do that, with that, and I'm being more regimented than the literature recommends. So what I've just said there probably gets you 95% of the way there.
Yeah, I agree. You read Ikigai? Is it
sorry?
The book Ikigai?
No,
the Japanese book. There's actually an exercise there. They
Oh,
show
yeah.
you range of motion of when you wake up in the morning, whatever. You can do these
Tai Chi,
yeah,
all
it's
that
literally,
stuff.
It's
Yeah.
just like doing
That's
just
it.
range of motion.
That's
like,
it.
That's all it is. It's just
Yeah,
like
it's just, listen,
it's not weights. It's not everything. It's just your body just moving.
your body tells you all this stuff. What do you do when you wake up? You stretch. We don't even have to.
We don't even think about it.
We
just
don't even
do it.
think about it. We do it. But now think about it and do it more often. It's like do the opposite. We're here, so the more you could do anything out here and stretch, open up, it's going to be beneficial, 100%.
Start paying attention to dogs. What do they do when they have a nice nap?
Nice big stretch. Exactly. It's all inherent. We know this stuff. Society makes it erased from our brains.
Capitalism, business, government, all that other stuff. We didn't want to get into that. Thank you so much, Luigi. You can reach him at www.pinpointhealth.ca, info@pinpointhealth.ca. His email is LNALLI at pinpoint.ca. And then on IG under pinpoint_health. And then his personal one is Dr.Lounalli. 12 questions of construction.
Let's do it.
What's your favorite construction word?
So when I was looking at that, do you mean like what would be used like just amongst a bunch of guys or in the industry?
Any word. It doesn't matter. It could be
I haven't been in the construction industry in so long, but I feel like the word that always was there, that was the most overused and is probably my favorite word is fuck, right? Like it was just like, that's all you heard all the time. Like, especially me, I'm in more of a professional environment now, so you never really hear swearing. And then I've got friends that own construction companies and things. And the minutes you're there, it's like, it's everywhere.
Least favorite tool. Doesn't have to be construction.
No, for me, I'm decently handy. I would say I've never liked table saws, like anything where I don't know why. Like it's just I've never
open blade like that or something.
It's not even the fear of getting hurt. I just feel like I've never been fully confident. Maybe it's because I've never done it enough that I've built that confidence. But I would say like anytime I've looked at a table saw and I've used it before for different things, I'm just always like, I'd prefer not to do it.
You need a track saw. Nothing like wrangling a 4x8 sheet of plywood on a table saw and cutting that by yourself.
Yeah.
What construction sound do you love?
I guess I'll go back to my roots with the painting. So like a roller on the wall or a brush, like just that. Yeah. There was something, in fact, when I still paint, like it's funny.
Relaxing.
People will still call me to like help paint their rooms and stuff. There is something meditative about it. I love doing it. And for two things, it's not only the sound, but like if you're cutting a line, you can't lose focus or so you have to be focused. You're rolling something. If you're not paying attention, you'll hit the ceiling or you'll hit the floor. So there's it's sort of like controlling your breath. So and so the sound ties in with that for me.
Exact same way. Favorite beverage?
I'd say water or coffee. I'm not a pop guy or wine, red wine.
What turns you on and off in construction?
I think one thing that I always loved about when I was, again, more involved in the construction world was like the camaraderie, like everybody, the friendships that you build, all of those things. I loved that about it. What turned me off is sometimes dealing with, like, I'm very much the type of person, if there's a problem, I want to have an open conversation and have a discussion. I found a lot of times, like, some of the tempers in the construction world were just like, they either want to like destroy you or never talk to you again. It's like, but I feel like there's a middle ground there. So so it was, yeah. The thing I liked the most was
the
just
two sides.
Yeah, the two extremes of it.
It's very yin yang. It's very black and white.
Yeah, and that's what I noticed a lot of the time. It was like, and it wasn't always with me. It was with other guys that I work with, like people that were friends, stopped being friends for over the dumbest things. But then the friendships were the best. That's like that was what was nice about it.
True. What's your favorite curse word?
Fuck. Yeah.
Favorite vehicle? Any mode of transportation?
I'm not a big car guy. Like I'm.
But it could be anything. We had a guy here recently. He was like, my feet. Like,
I guess my feet. I run 30K a week. So yeah, I'll go with my feet.
What do you miss from your childhood?
I think just like going out and just being free. Like, you know, I remember like you just like leave the house in the morning and like go everywhere. And, you know, my dad would have this strong whistle. And when you heard it, you were like, okay, now it's time to go back. But just that freedom of like, and carefree, right? Like life is different now. Like, you know, like this never turns off for me because of everything I've got going on. So, you know, I remember being a kid and just literally enjoying the moment. And that's a nice feeling.
That's a great feeling. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt one day?
One day I do have aspirations of getting into politics one day, mainly because on the health side, because I do want to try to make impactful changes. So that's what would want to do after this career. If you asked me, like, if you had done something different, I probably would have stuck with the trades, with painting, and tried to like build a business out of that. I feel like the natural business knack, doesn't matter what I was doing, I probably would have developed it into a bigger business anyways.
Good luck with the political side. I mean,
we'll see.
Not a lot of healthy people.
No, and that's why, like, if that's what I'm saying. You look at these things, it's like,
you look at the people dictating on what we should be eating, and they don't look all that healthy.
Yeah. But we'll see. Like, it's funny, prior to COVID, that was always a dream of mine. During COVID, being a politician became much less of a dream. But I guess if you're asking fundamentally from a profession standpoint, that would be the only other thing I'd see myself doing, is some public service to give back.
Nice. What profession do you not want to do?
I don't want to, the consulting type of work, like in my field, like what's common, especially if you're building a big business and it gets bought out one day or whatever, like I guess I could have some authority to be like a private consultant. And I've had consultants talk to me about stuff, and a lot of the time it sounds like a ton of BS.
Yeah.
So I don't want to be that person where I'm like, if I am going to consult somebody, and I already do, I teach at the chiropractic school, so I'm a professor there. I help tons of students just out of the goodwill. Like, I would rather just do it out of goodwill than be like, here's my hourly fee for my advice type of thing. I just feel like you have to fluff up too much stuff and justify something with all these big terms and BS that is not fundamental.
I agree. Last question. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at those pearly gates?
I guess I'd want something along the lines of knowing that I'm human, that he could turn around to me and say, you know what? You weren't perfect, but you did as best as you could. I'll give you that much. That's
all you need to say.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Luigi. I really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, so
Come
do
back
I.
anytime, man. Continue the conversation. And this has been good. And I honestly like to believe that people are listening, because I get people reaching out to me going, listen, I got this problem, I got that problem.
Yeah.
And it's funny that we've all aged now on social media, and we've all grown up now.
Yeah.
And I'm probably one of the older ones.
Yeah.
And they're now start realizing what I was preaching about on social media and what I've been preaching on this show a lot about.
I think what you're doing, like, again, because I've watched your show, it's like, yes, there's some of the shows are much more technical than the construction stuff. But again, you get into these conversations on everything sort of, and really I feel like you're trying to help tradespeople out there.
Simple.
And that was an interest for me to reach out, like, and just say, like, hey, if I can provide some value, and I think what you're doing is great. And people obviously are listening.
Yeah.
And again, how does change happen? One person at a time.
That's all that matters.
That's it.
So if they have any questions, I'm sure that they all got some pain going on.
They can reach out to me. I'm happy to reach out. I'm happy to try.
And you were saying that off mic before we got started. You've got clinics in all
across the GTA. We have 12 clinics across the GTA. We're constantly opening up more, and they're all, again, everything like the rehab stuff, the medical stuff. But even outside of just, again, I'm more on, even when I did the radio show and I'd get people calling, I'm not a guy that's here to sell my business.
Yeah.
Like, and we do lots of marketing, so I sell it in a different way. But I genuinely, like, going back to like the same way I would want to help another professional, I love to talk to people and see if I can point them in the right direction, help them to navigate something. So if someone's listening and like follow me on Instagram, DM me,
you got
like,
a question?
I'm not going to be the guy that says like, here's the number for my clinic. Like, I'll try to have a conversation with you and see, that doesn't mean I won't recommend that you should get treatment, but go get treatment anywhere. I don't care. Like,
we just talked on the surface of it, just generalizing. We didn't get into specifics.
No.
If you got specifics and you're interested,
Yeah.
trust me, whenever I speak to people like you, I start, like, it's just funny. You get older and you start having these situations, and I'm curious about it. But I mean, get the information. Don't necessarily get all the information from one source.
No.
I always tell people, do your own homework
100%.
and try to figure out what is going to benefit you.
Yes.
You're an individual.
Yeah.
That's it. And whatever happened to you or what's ever happening to you is individual as well too.
Yeah, and I think a good way to end this off, like, for when you look at that, because you've said that a few times where you're like, you're part of it. When you look at what we call evidence-based medicine or evidence-based care, it's three things. It's the best scientific evidence that we have. So if we want to do something, it's the best scientific evidence, the clinician's experience and other people in that profession, what they say. And the last part that everyone forgets about, patient preference.
Yeah.
That's you, right?
Yeah.
So you be involved in that, because at the end of the day, and I teach my students, out of those three, which one do you think is the most important? patient preference. Because you can have the best scientific literature in the world. You can have every clinician in agreement. If the patient doesn't want it, you ain't doing it.
No.
And it ain't going to work. Like, it's just not going to happen. So don't forget to be, don't just, I always tell people, and when they come to the clinic, and I used to say this on the radio, health is not something done to you. Health is something you do for yourself. The professionals like me and my team, we're just here to assist. That's it. Simple. We can be part of your health, but it's your health.
Yeah.
And that's it. If you want help, but don't go somewhere, to us, anywhere, thinking that someone else is going to take responsibility for your health. That's crazy. That is not going to happen, and it's on you.
Yeah.
You should not have that ideology and that outlook. If you have that, I can almost guarantee you're not healthy right now, and you're headed nowhere good.
Thanks so much, man.
My pleasure.
We're out of here.